First of all, we are in the age of narratology. So the narrative of the double game was a US mechanism for seeking Pakistan support in a coercive manner. We must be clear on that. If we are not clear, then we are likely to go wrong. Now, first of all, when 9/11 happened, the first reaction that Pakistan had to it was that it was something wrong. And while it will create complications for Pakistan, it is also an opportunity for Pakistan to align itself with the international community on this problem. Because obviously, over the preceding decade or so, after the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, the international community had disengaged from Afghanistan and thrown it into the lap of Pakistan.
U.S. intelligence analysts now believe that there is imminent danger of some kind of Soviet military action into northwestern Pakistan. Some intelligence reports indicate that the action will take place in less than a month. What is anticipated is not so much an invasion of Pakistan, but rather hot pursuit across the Durand Line, the international boundary between Afghanistan and Pakistan, to strike against concentrations of Afghan insurgents who are using northwestern Pakistan as a sanctuary.
And consequently, we are not Argentina or Brazil that we could have a detached view sitting and make our decisions from a distance. We are a country which has the longest border with Afghanistan, and we are directly impacted by events, good or bad, in Afghanistan. So therefore, we had to take decisions. We had to cope with the situations. And our coping with the situation, where the international community had detached, had created challenges, interaction challenges for Pakistan with other countries. And that had meant that our Afghan policy was viewed in a negative light. So 9/11 brought us that opportunity to re-engage with the international community, realign with the international thinking on Afghanistan, and end that isolation, that policy isolation that existed before 9/11. Now, the first interaction between President Musharraf at that time and President Bush was towards the end of October 2001. If you recall, the bombing at Afghanistan, the US invasion of Afghanistan had started on 7th of October. And I happened to be in that meeting. And one of the first things that Pakistan told right at the summit level to President Bush was that there is no military solution in Afghanistan. This has to be, I keep hearing these statements from our leaders now. It happened right in October 2001 that there is no military solution, there has to be a political solution. So now that their military intervention has started, please bring it to an early closure, transit to a political strategy, find an inclusive solution which can bring in all the stakeholders in Afghanistan on board, and we can find a more lasting solution there, which is not based on violence.
Pakistan recognized the Taliban. Nobody else did. We opened our missions, but we were being reprimanded. We were being told, why are we dealing with my strategy, which I told to President Clinton even in March 2000, when he told me, why are we dealing with the Taliban? I said, I would suggest that you also recognize them. Open your missions in Kabul so that we moderate them from inside. Had that happened, maybe we could have prevented the blowing up of the Buddha statue, or even maybe this Osama bin Laden issue would not have come about.
They went wrong right from the outset. Number one, they sought a military solution. This brought about a change on the basis of violence. I mean, the Taliban regime, whatever its legitimacy or illegitimacy, it was a de facto government in Afghanistan, was overthrown through violence. And then they went wrong, that when they sought to structure or to find a state structure, they did not make it inclusive. They pick and chose those who were aligned with the US prior to 9/11. Because as we very well know, the Northern Alliance was being supported by the CIA. They had presence with the Northern Alliance, as well as there were other governments, most prominently India and Iran. The result was that the solution that came about was exclusive. The Bonn Process 1 was exclusive. Next, they went wrong is that when they were on the ascendant and they were dominating the military situation in Afghanistan, that was the time to seek again, and I use the word with some emphasis, an inclusive political solution. They failed. That was the time of 2003, 4, 5. When the Taliban also was seeking a solution, they were seeking political space and a political engagement. Again, because the dominant thinking was seeking a military solution, imposing a solution, they failed to capitalize on that opportunity. And then this went on. I'll come on to the change of government in the United States when President Obama took over, and he said his famous speech on a new strategy for Afghanistan. That was in December 2009. And he said, we are going to now transit from a kinetic or a military solution to a political solution. And that the political solution will now be the dominant trait of the US strategy.
We will work with our partners, the United Nations, and the Afghan people to pursue a more effective civilian strategy so that the government can take advantage of improved security.
Unfortunately, this is not how it was operationalized. The immediate step or the first step in the operationalization of that strategy was the surge, the military surge. Second, the conditions that were offered were that the Taliban should integrate into the Afghan system. Now, those were things which were not realistic. They were not well thought out. And then we found that subsequently, when the time came for a dialogue with the Taliban, it was delayed. Right from 2011-12 to we see a more serious engagement starting somewhere in 2017-18. So many years were lost over there. All along, it had been told to the US, I personally had made these comments with the US interlocutors. This had been told at all levels to the United States, that unless the withdrawal of US forces is on the table, there cannot be any sustainable and substantive dialogue with the Taliban. Unfortunately, that was another lost opportunity, that they refused to keep that on the table. They would keep talking directly and indirectly about withdrawal, but they didn't have it on the table. It was only seriously brought in when the Doha process took shape. So I think all along these mistakes were being made. Finally, in my view, that once they made an agreement, it was not sincerely pursued, because there were many voices in the United States, in Washington, D.C., which really were not supportive of the Doha agreement with the Taliban. And consequently, whether it was on the release of prisoners, whether it was on convincing Ashraf Ghani's government in Kabul in pursuing the agreements. In my view, it was again a US failure to take advantage of those 1.5 years available before their actual withdrawal. Pakistan has played a very positive role. As I said, we were absolutely committed to be part of the international consensus on Afghanistan post 9/11. We were absolutely committed in accordance with the UN Security Council resolutions to support the struggle against violent extremism and terrorism. Pakistan was very, I would say, transparent and very sincere in supporting the international commitments in Afghanistan. And it is indeed a cruel joke to accuse Pakistan of double game. If it was a double game, I must say it must have been a very dumb double game, because in the process we lost 70,000 Pakistanis, number one, and we suffered enormously in terms of opportunity cost when it comes to our economy. So there was never a double game. Unfortunately, the problem was on the US side. The thinking in the United States, unfortunately, was that Pakistan, they tended to ignore Pakistan's vital national interests. And they thought Pakistan could merely be bought off by an aid package. The most fundamental concerns that Pakistan had on its security was how the future of Afghanistan would shape up. Second, what would be India's role in this region? And unfortunately, on both those counts, Pakistan's concerns, and I must say they were critical security concerns, national security concerns, existential security concerns, they were totally thrown away. I'll give you an example. This new Afghan military, which has grown, the threat perception has been worked out very closely with the US military. But if you find out their threat perception, it is entirely Pakistan as the enemy. Now, how could it happen on the US charge? Number two, a strategic trajectory was worked out with India. Well, Pakistan was the ally. The strategic trajectory was being worked out with India. And India piggybacked on the US to land up in Afghanistan and to absolutely work against the peace and stability of Pakistan. It is now well known and recorded that Afghanistan was used by the Indian intelligence services to destabilize our two western provinces. This again happened on the US charge. To say that the United States did not know what India was doing out of Afghanistan it doesn't appeal to sense.